Hey, thank you for joining me once again. Welcome back to Truth Matters, the place where we discuss truths from a biblical standpoint and, of course, an enlightened common sense. Now, we've been speaking about Babylon in the past couple of videos to show you that, as I said in Revelations 18, that there's going to be a day and a time in the end when Babylon is going to fall. The false system by Antichrist is going to fall. But in order to fall, it has to exist. In order for it to exist, there has to be a time in history when it begins once again, because the original Babylon goes back to the Tower of Babel back in Genesis with Nimrod creating a system and a tower all the way up to heaven where he becomes military dictator, the government, he becomes the high priest. So it's, the political system, the religious system, and it's going to be birthed once again just before the tribulation. So it's important to understand and figure out, when is this Babylon going to begin, this new Babylon? I believe we are in the pre-Babylonian stage. This is pre-Babylon, the time of sorrows of Babylon, as I like to call it, eschatologically speaking. We're not there yet. We're not in Babylon, but we are ushering in a Babylonian system. And it's important to know because so if we're in it, it's not going to be too long before if we're in the stages of it, of the beginning of Babylon, it's not going to be too long before we actually get in and it actually begins. And once the system is in place, Antichrist steps right in and takes over. And when he does, tribulation will begin, and then the final 7 years of humanity before Christ comes back. Now, last video, we spoke on the main characteristics of the Babylon system that you see in Revelation, that you saw in Genesis, that we're seeing today. And that was the characteristic of rebellion, a system devoid of the truth. So you can see the last video to check that out. But I want to quickly go over 3 more characteristics that we see today in our society that are part of the Babylonian system, to prove once again that we're in that stages of ushering in Babylon. Number 1, violence is tolerated. The Bible is very clear about murder and violence. It's against it. We've seen in the news over the past year, government allows violence to go uncontested. They let people loot. They let them pillage. They let them burn because it's their right. They're just expressing themselves, and they allow that violence. And the Babylonian system is actually a system of violence and murder, and it's allowed as long as it champions the cause of Babylon. Now, in Revelation 18:13, it says that, when Babylon falls, the merchants are weeping and they're sad because Babylon has fallen, and they can no longer get rich by the commodities that they used to buy and sell, the gold, the silver, the cinnamon, the essence, and all these things are commodities that all the merchants of the world got rich on a Babylonian system because of what they sold and they bought and they traded. Well, that in the final thing in that list is the bodies of men and the souls of men. In other words, there was sex trade, slave trade. Humans were being sold for sex, for slaves, and that human beings became a commodity. So obviously, if you're going to allow that, there has to be violence. So it's a very violent system. Planned Parenthood, the rise in abortion, that is an abomination to God. Violence is tolerated. Planned racism, pitting the blacks against the whites and people groups against people groups, which actually Jesus says in the end times, nation will rise up against nation. That's ethnos, ethnic groups against ethnic groups. And, if you look at this is my take, if you look at the book of Revelation, the United States is not mentioned in the end because it will no longer exist as a world power. And I believe a few things will happen. One of them is the states are going to fall apart internally by civil war. That's just my belief. Stealing and looting and all these things that are happening, that's a system of violence that is tolerated in Babylon that we've seen today in our own society. Also, another one, number 2, freedom is removed. In the Babylonian system, freedom is removed. Obviously, in the end times, if you don't have the mark of the beast, you have no freedom. You can't buy or sell, you can't even live. If you don't bow down to the Antichrist and take the mark, or if you don't worship the beast, you get killed. There's no freedom. Freedom is a privilege given by God to all, okay? And in the Babylonian system, freedom is not only redefined, it is removed. God says to them, go all over the world, scatter, multiply, have children, go all over the world and populate it. And so that we have that freedom to roam. But then Nimrod said, no, we're not going to roam. We're going to build our own city, our own tower, our own religion, our own government. We're going to stay right here. So Nimrod in the Babylonian system took away the freedom God gave mankind. Okay. Now, you are encouraged to fight in the Babylonian system, but only, again, as long as freedom is defined by the system. You can have freedom as long as freedom is defined by the system, not by God, not by anybody else. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom to protect yourself, freedom to bear arms. All of these are systematically taken away. Freedom of opinion against the narrative is not permitted. Just go to social media. If you do something wrong, you say something wrong, you're in Facebook jail. So all these are signs of a socialist, communist system that we are sadly heading into. Canada is on the prime of that, where our rights and our freedoms are being taken away every day. That is part of the Babylonian system, where you have the one world government that rules everything, dictates what is right, what is wrong, what's freedom, what is not. So you have violence tolerated, freedom removed, and finally, the Babylonian system promotes dependence on government for security. So again, in the final Babylon, Antichrist gives people all the money they can have, all the buying and selling they can do, as long as they have the mark of the beast. Back in the days of Nimrod, he determined what the people could do or could not do because he was their king, he was their high priest. And today we have this issue with COVID-19, which is a totalitarian takeover by the government. Now, I'm not saying that, was it planned? Was COVID planned? Was it not planned? Was it an accident? I'm not here to debate that. But the government is using that for their own ends. I mean, if the government is given power to do whatever they want, it's going to be hard for them to relinquish that power once again. And people just went along with everything the government said without really thinking about it or any scientific data, because, they just wanted to do what, for our protection, right? Basically, the government began to do whatever they wanted to protect us, and they promised us protection. The government promised people protection, and in return, they only demanded your silent, obedient consent. Okay, social distancing, forced mask, bailouts by the government, sending you stimulus checks and all that to get you through because, work is scarce and the government is priming the people to depend on the government, a social security system, a welfare system. The government's going to supply all your needs, the global reset, money reset, where all your debt is going to be taken away, but the government owns everything. Cashless societies, microchips, forced vaccinations, okay? The Babylonian system is one of total control, the bodies and souls of men, okay? And the buzzword at the moment is wokeness. We are being woke to a reality we never knew before, okay? That's the new normal. But it's actually waking up to a modern Babylon. At the foundation of this thing, wokeness has been waking up to modern day Babylon. And that's what's happening today in our time. We are ushering in Babylon. And like I said, once Babylon is in full force, Antichrist comes in, and when he does, tribulation will begin. That's where we are. That's why we need to be careful. We need to be prayed up. We need to be wise to the days that we live in, okay? Because we are not yet in Babylon, but we're ushering it in. We're in the pre-phase of Babylon, and once it starts, all hell's going to break loose, and no pun intended. Thank you very much for watching. Catch me in the next video. And once again, if you're going to stand up for anything, stand up for truth, and the truth will stand up for you. God bless you.